Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining. Gonna give it a couple minutes, give people some time to join. In the meantime, let us know where you're checking in from, how you're feeling today. A lot happened over the weekend, right? Let us know if you saw the eclipse yesterday. I had to do my own little makeshift glasses, but I think I saw it. I couldn't take a picture. I did a quick peek and then I had to put my head back down. All right, we got a lot of it was cloudy in Suffolk County. Okay. Eclipse with the kiddos. Nice. Felt the earth move. Yeah, that was different. I didn't get a chance to feel it. I was actually in the gym. But I heard it was very eventful. I heard there was a couple of them too. Oceanside. Okay. Appreciate you joining. Earthquake on Long Island felt like a huge truck. Wow. Not eventful at all. Very scary. Understandable. Very understandable. Probably give it another minute and then we'll get started. Have a lot of good information today. And I have three lovely guests who have taken their time out to bring that information to everyone. All right, so we are at 12:03. First, I want to thank everybody for being with us here today. If you don't know who I am Sean Lee. I work over at the Central Billing Office, and I am a co-lead of Heritage of Latinx Alliance with Katari Villanueva and Frank Pabon. And every year, we love to have these conversations around a topic that most people really don't like to talk about, and we hope that this information is very helpful to everyone. So we are here. It is April, Autism Awareness Month, and I am lucky to have a guest here who comes with a lot of experience, a lot of expertise. Catherine Sanchimino. She is the assistant professor and clinical psychologist at the Seaver Autism Center for Research and Treatment at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Catherine, it is so good to have you here today.
Thank you. So I am sharing my screen, and here's the presentation format. So you should be able to see it properly. And I'm going to time myself so that I don't go over, because other folks are also here that have a lot of valuable information as well. And of course, that means I'm not going to be able to go through every single thing I would like to say, but I will say as much as I can. And I'm just going to start off with defining autism spectrum disorder, explaining the diagnostic process, and then also explaining current interventions. So defining autism spectrum disorder, it's a neurodevelopmental disability, and it is characterized by impairments both in social communication and interaction, as well as restrictive and repetitive patterns of behavior. There are many different co-occurring diagnoses that occur along with autism. But that's the basic diagnosis, is that there must be present at least 3 impairments in social impairment in social reciprocity, in nonverbal communication, and difficulty forming and maintaining relationships, as well as at least 2 of the 4 restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. And that might be in the form of repetitive speech or motor mannerisms, motor behaviors, insistence on routine or sameness, having highly focused interests, or sensory sensitivities, hypo or hyper reactivity to sensory experiences. So some key facts about autism spectrum disorder: 1 in 36 children in the United States currently has a diagnosis of autism. Boys are 4 times more likely than girls to receive a diagnosis, and that we can diagnose as early as 2, but more often than not, children are not diagnosed until age 4 or older. And individuals can also be diagnosed in adulthood. And then approximately 30% of children with autism do have a developmental disability. And oops, I went too early. Autism affects people across all ethnic and socioeconomic groups, although some groups do tend to be diagnosed later, which is more of an issue of access to resources and access to being able to get a proper evaluation and diagnosis, and then treatment services. But we do know that having an early diagnosis and starting intervention early on can have very positive long-term effects on symptoms, later skills, later independence. And that there's still no medical test. There's no blood test for autism. The assessment does need to be done through a behavioral observation as well as testing with a psychologist, but that's all behavioral. It's not, there's no blood test to prove autism diagnosis, and there's also no cure, but there's a lot of intervention and treatment that is very helpful. So there is a rising prevalence of autism, as I imagine many people in the audience are aware. And that more recently, individuals with Black, Hispanic, Asian, or Pacific Islander background are being identified more and more, likely because of efforts to increase access to resources, not because of any changes in the population. Autism is primarily a genetic disorder, and what that means is that about 80% of the risk for autism is caused by gene changes. There are over 100 high-risk ASD genes that have been identified, and that's why genetic testing is so important once an individual has an autism diagnosis. Environmental factors are associated with autism, and there's a lot of research in this area currently. People who are genetically predisposed to autism are more likely to have a diagnosis. Pregnancy and birth complications can contribute to the likelihood of a diagnosis. One thing that we want to be very, very clear about is vaccines do not cause autism. In fact, the individuals who promoted that theory, that paper was retracted, and the lead author lost his license to practice medicine. Many, many studies since then have been conducted that demonstrate there's no link between vaccines and autism. And really the increase in prevalence is more likely due to the fact that we have better screening. We know more than we used to. We have better access to assessment. And there's also intervention and treatment options that didn't used to exist. So there's more motivation to get a diagnosis knowing that there are treatments that will help. I think I have to speed up because I have a lot of slides. So most children on the autism spectrum their caregivers have documented concern in their medical record before age 3. But unfortunately, that doesn't mean those children are all getting access to services before age 3. And this is something that that is a big focus in our community about how do we help children and families get access to evaluations faster. So this is kind of our tracker about how parents often notice a concern before the, maybe even years before an evaluation actually happens. One thing I just want to emphasize is that, and at least in the state of New York, an early intervention evaluation is free, and anyone can make a referral. You can refer yourself. So if you think that your child who's under age 3 years old, if you see concerns with their communication or development, or maybe a family friend or a teacher says to you, there's something that's not quite, seems a bit different, you don't have to have your pediatrician refer you for an evaluation. You can contact your early intervention providers yourself, and that's all available on the internet. Diagnostic assessment. So we conduct a clinical interview. So that's the clinical psychologist or developmental pediatrician will have an interview with the family. And then we also use gold standard diagnostic measures. Although an autism diagnosis does not require an ADOS to be administered. And that was really important during the pandemic, the very early beginning of the pandemic, when we couldn't conduct an ADOS because it needs to be conducted in person. There can be autism evaluations that are very high quality, that are administered through other measures. But the ADOS is a gold standard measure, and it's what we use here at the Seaver Center. It's administered by a clinician, semi-structured. It kind of just looks like we're playing with your kids, and we have a lot of fun activities that we're doing with them. But we are looking for particular behaviors, social back and forth. How do kids play? Is there pretend? The administration is about 45 minutes long, up to 60 minutes, depending on the age of the child. And then we also conducted ADI, that's the Autism Diagnostic Interview. It's a very, very thorough interview looking at very early behaviors and onset of symptoms and, potential regressions in behavior. So comprehensive diagnostic process isn't just one thing. It's just not just one visit to the clinician or the psychologist or developmental pediatrician. So as you can see through this little web, including the ADOS and the ADI, there are additional assessments. So we might also be looking at what is the language development, and that evaluation be conducted by a speech therapist. What are the adaptive abilities? That's an interview with the parents understanding, or the caregivers understanding, is a child doing the behaviors that are expected for independence based on their age? There's genetic screening. The clinical interview includes a lot of developmental history, medical history, psychiatric history, family history. So there's a lot that goes into the thought process regarding making an autism diagnosis. And what interventions does the patient need, and in what frequency, is something that we're also considering in a diagnosis, as well as in the plan for intervention. So I'm going to race through these because I'm aware of the time. So behavioral interventions, like many people will probably have heard of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, and that looks really different for every child based on their age, based on their ability level. The goal of ABA is to have very specific goals that are workable, that the child is working toward with their therapist. And then once they achieve the goals, you set another set of goals. And those are based on how do you increase independence, increase social interactions that are going to help a person in their overall development. And there's a lot of different models of ABA. Educational interventions, as I mentioned, early intervention is 0 to 3. So then in New York, there's the committees for preschool special education. That's where the schools take over from age 3 to 5. And then at age 5, children enter kindergarten, and that's the committees for special education. A 504 plan, it's good to note, is not the same thing as special education, and it carries through to the workplace. It could be implemented at a college, it could be implemented at a job setting, and it's really a way to identify workplace environmental features that can really support an individual's ability to do their job, to perform. And related services, occupational therapy, speech therapy are some of the most common, but social skills groups, parent training, physical therapy are often added supports. So early intervention, just reiterate, it's free. The evaluation does not cost anything, and you can refer yourself. You can refer your child, so you don't have to have somebody make the referral for you. And it's from 0 to 3, so it's never too early to do an evaluation. And the services that are resulting in early intervention could be ABA, speech therapy, feeding therapy, occupational therapy, specialized instruction, where a teacher, like an individual teacher, would come to your home, like a behavioral aid. So there's a lot of different services that would be available through early intervention. And then CPSC is ages 3 through 5. When a child is too old for early intervention, then they become eligible for CPSC services. Often it includes going to a special education classroom and receiving all the services in one place. Whereas with early intervention, it's often the therapist will come to your home. And then, so what is IDEA? So this is very, very important for anyone who has a disability, not just autism. It was a law that was passed in 1975, and it's a federal law that ensures that students who have disabilities can attend school and have the right to attend school, free and appropriate education in the school setting it's called FAPE, and the least restrictive environment, meaning that if a child is able to join a general education classroom, that is the appropriate setting for them, they'll do that. And maybe they'll need a one-to-one aide, like a paraprofessional to help them in that environment to increase independence and increase access to the curriculum. And IDEA covers all school-age children who have a disability. But in order to become eligible for special education, the school will do an evaluation to determine if the disability is impacting the educational performance. And there are times when a child has a disability, but they're not eligible for special education because they're still performing quite well in school. They're getting good grades, they're not getting in trouble, they're not having major problems with peer interactions. So it's good to remember, just because a disability is present doesn't necessarily mean they will receive special education services. I think that I'm going to have to kind of go through these quickly, and the slides will be available at the end of the webinar. And you can also contact me if you have any questions about any of them. So I just wanted to introduce the Seaver Autism Center. So our mission is not just in providing the evaluations to the families who come to see us, but to really enhance the diagnosis of autism and related disorders, understanding the biological causes of those disorders, and to develop and disseminate treatments that are going to help individuals with an autism diagnosis. So we really strive to bridge the gap between new discoveries in basic science and enhanced care, while we ensure that our community is aware of new and improved approaches to caring for people on the autism spectrum. So when families come to us, we provide a lot of information about what is available to them in the community. So it's not just participating in our research, but it's also kind of benefiting from our collective knowledge. So there are there's two different cores. There's the assessment and genetics core, and we are a multidisciplinary team: psychology, psychiatry, neurology, and clinical genetics. And each person who participates in our research does receive a free autism evaluation, as long as you're eligible for one of the studies that we have ongoing. So here's some of our studies. The GALA is going on right now, the GALA study, and the purpose is to collect clinical and genetic information to explore genetic risks for autism spectrum disorder, specifically within individuals who have Hispanic ancestry and background, and English and Spanish speaking families are eligible to enroll, and that's we're still enrolling people for that study right now. So we have another clinical trial going on, the human growth hormone, enrolling 2 to 12-year-olds who meet DSM-5 criteria for an autism spectrum disorder. This also includes a clinical evaluation to determine the presence of autism. And every child in this study will receive either human growth hormone, and then in one phase, and then placebo during the other. So that's also continuing to enroll. We have the caregiver endorsed intervention strategies for the treatment of sensory reactivity symptoms in children with neurodevelopmental disorders. So this is a new project, and this is specifically aiming at understanding the caregiver experience, which is for any parents and caregivers who have children with an autism diagnosis. You understand there are a lot of educational opportunities as your child grows. You'll be learning all sorts of new systems and acronyms. So this study in particular is looking to understand that caregiver experience in several different ways. So at Mount Sinai, there are resources available. There's peak clinical recommended practices, educational training, you can definitely contact me to tell you more about that. The sensory toolkits there's like some things to squeeze, some things to kind of look at and play with. It's kind of a nice thing to throw in your backpack to have, like if you're on the bus and your child's having a hard time, it's something just to kind of give them to look at and focus on, kind of reduce overstimulation from the outside environment. There's a video resource library. We have a lot on the Seaver Center website, a lot of different videos. And I think I actually finished within the time I had set for myself. So thank you very much. At the very end of the webinar, I'll be able to answer questions. Apologize for racing through, but I didn't want to go over time.
No, that was great, Catherine. You're a master for that. I don't know if y'all counted the slides, but that was actually very impressive. Before we bring up our other guest speakers, I do want to ask the question of how important is it that people take advantage of early intervention?
I would say that is probably one of the most critical steps, because what we have found is that families, moms and dads in particular, will often feel that something about their child is a little bit different or off, and they'll tell the pediatrician, and they'll notice it before the pediatrician does. Having that early evaluation can get them started on the path to getting help before the child becomes an older age. The first 3 years of development is when the human brain is doing the most growing, the most developing, like the most connections are made during the first 3 years of life as compared to all the rest of your life. So I would say it's critical to have an evaluation at that age. One, because parents typically do notice that something might be a little bit different. And number two, getting help at that age can make a really, really big difference in the overall outcome. And it can also really help to improve the parent's relationship with your child too. If you feel like something's different, let me see what I can do about it, and then you get help for it. It can, I think, help your feelings of powerfulness as a parent, that you know what to do to help your child. So seeking an evaluation, early intervention is an extremely good idea. And if it turns out that there's no concern, well, then you have that news. And if it turns out there's a diagnosis, well, then you're started at the, on the path to getting support as early as possible.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I totally agree. As a parent of a child who's diagnosed with autism, I can't stress enough, if you are having any signs or symptoms, you should act right away. You're going to have family pressures. You're going to have, cultural pressures. To Catherine's point, it's an evaluation. All it is really just to see what's going on. So I can't stress that enough. All right. Well, thank you so much, Catherine. All right. So now we're going to bring in our other two guest speakers. First, we have Jessica Carrion. She is a bilingual speech language pathologist, presently working with children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, with over 15 years of experience in the field, working at various patient settings, including skilled nursing facilities, pediatric rehabilitation clinics, and hospitals. She has a bachelor's of arts degree in special speech language pathology and a master of science in speech language pathology. Impressive. And additionally, she obtained her Teachers of Students with Speech Language Disabilities certification from New York State Department of Education, and was a recipient of American Speech Language Hearing Association Award for Continuing Education in 2021. Okay, Jessica, excuse me.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, thank you for joining us. And then we also have Chow Mei. She leads the YAI's Link Department, a vital resource for people navigating support services for the neurodivergent community. With a decade of experience, she's a passionate advocate dedicated to connecting individuals and families with the services that they need. Chow Mei, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely, definitely. So I'm going to start with you, Jessica. If you could just tell us briefly about yourself and what made you want to become a speech pathologist.
Well, hello, everyone. So I think life led me to become a speech language pathologist. As a teenager, I had the opportunity to meet a therapist who I cannot forget my dialogue with her. She was just so happy to share her everyday experience as a therapist. Life continued and led me to St. John's University. And thankfully, a counselor said, "Hey, why don't you take this course?" And from the moment I took that course, I knew that was what I wanted to pursue. I always wanted to focus on bilingual as a Spanish speaking therapist because I could understand the perspective as a child of an immigrant family and what their needs are. Um, as a speech therapist, it gives us so many opportunities, as you mentioned. We can work from the NICU to a skilled nursing facility. The possibility of professional growth is just endless opportunities. So it was always something that life drew me to this career choice.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Chow May, I mean, being a part of YAI organization and me just learning about this organization this year was very impressive for all the work that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into your role and the department you actually lead over there?
Sure. So I actually started in this field about more than 10 years ago, when I first started as a caseworker, and I was assigned to work with individuals and families who were facing a more complex set of challenges beyond their developmental disabilities, including autism. So those challenges were issues like housing, financial, medical, and mental health. And unequal access to quality education. And then a core part of my role was to find appropriate programs and services for those families while also advocating to make sure that they receive the rightful support they deserve. And in my role then, I really got to witness the struggles firsthand the families face, and was really eye-opening, and it really profoundly revealed the obstacles that people face when they are seeking for either appropriate evaluation or access to services. And then my journey led me to YI, where I initially started as a benefits specialist, helping people navigate, apply, and maintain their benefits like Medicaid, food stamps, and Social Security. Eventually, I ended up working in the intake department at YI, and I led the efforts to streamline the intake process. So that meant I really got a chance to make a change to make access to services smoother and easier for families who were looking for essential services. Right now, I'm at YAI's Link department. Link is YAI's information and referral resource, where we empower, educate, and connect individuals and families to services through the different service systems in New York. And my passionate team of 5 advocates really provide personalized guidance and explores really potential options with each person who contacts us. Our focus is on meeting people where they are, whether that's securing appropriate evaluations within the systems that they're in, or connecting them to internal YI services, or connecting them to external resources.
Thank you. That really sounds great. So now meeting people where they at, I really love that part, right? I think one of the toughest things that I hear about and experiencing this myself as a parent, getting the information, right? Finding out about these resources in our own way. If I am in a community that doesn't share the same experience, they don't have a child or an adult who identifies on the spectrum, what is YAI doing to make sure that the communication about their resources reaches these families?
So a couple of things we are doing. First, we participate with different grants and programs in underserved communities to make sure that we are out there providing the services that they need. But also, we in a way, when people contact us, we take down the information and we store them appropriately. So when we have program openings, things that's happening, we do marketing or outreach systematically so that everybody can get the information either with via their email. And now we're trying texting a mechanism where people can get information about program openings, what's happening at YI, what's available via text.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, Jessica, being a speech language pathologist, and I apologize before for shortening it, right?
That's
That just
okay.
shows you my
Stop.
lack of awareness there, right? So being a speech language pathologist, you have to tell me you finally have your certification, your degree. It's your first kid that you're working with. What was that experience like?
Of course, it's nerve-wracking, and it's something that I think we all, though, just came to a point that it was just comfortable because, you know, as a student, you have so many opportunities to learn and internships and externships. So you're actually almost more excited to put all your skills at use and to help this family or this child. So it was more excitement versus nerves.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Now, I know that it takes a village, right? And
Yes,
you're
absolutely.
there, right? You're working with the child. How important is the parents' involvement through this process? Because I remember when they came to the house, at first, I was busy, right? I'm working, I got
Hmm.
stuff to do. I'm like, this therapist is going to do their job, and magically, my son's going to be okay. That was not the
I
case. So
understand.
tell me
Yeah.
how important that was.
So I think, you know, we understand that as your perspective, as you as a father of a child with autism. Um, but parent involvement is crucial, is absolutely crucial in seeing progress in the children that we're working with. I often like to see it as that we are the building blocks, but the family is the foundation. The parents are definitely the foundations for carrying over actually the skills that we are teaching these children. In reality, the goal is that we slowly start to fade out and family takes, you know, that role as that primary educator. So I think those opportunities, whether it's 30 minutes once a week, or if some families have the opportunity to have it 5 times a week, to actually sit down. And even if you don't participate in the session, just observe and listen. I think that is very, very crucial because we want you guys as a family to be able to do things and even to adapt to things, scenarios that you might encounter. Or if we're there in your home, ask us questions, you know. This is like, when do we have the opportunity to have a professional in your home that you can ask anything? And please, by all means, ask us. Ask, even if it feels like the most silliest question, it isn't, you know, in the bigger picture of how we can help you as a professional.
Now, I do have to ask, how
Yes.
was it during COVID? Because I remember having
Oh.
to take
Mhm.
a Zoom meeting while having to make sure that he stayed focused was a job in itself. How was that for you?
That was a struggle. It was a struggle, I think, for everyone. Any profession that you were in, if you had to sit in front of a laptop or a tablet, it was very difficult. You know, we're talking about some children can sit for maybe 15 minutes, but then it was often seeing parents having to struggle to have them sit. And then also us as service provider is adapting our modalities of how we teach, because I use everything. I use communication boards, I use toys, I use videos, you know, it's endless the resources that we have. But now we're like, oh no, it's just on a screen. So that definitely was a challenge that we all thankfully overcame. But it really taught you to be quick on your feet as a therapist. So it was a good experience, you know, but it was something that I think we can put in our back pocket and say, hey, you know, we made it through and we adapted very quickly.
Yes, absolutely. I remember when me and my wife had to turn into teachers
Yeah,
overnight, and it was a bit of an experience through that process. So thank you. So
absolutely.
Chow May, I mean, what you're doing is very special, right? And I can imagine how taxing this is every day, trying to make sure that people in these underserved communities are getting the resources. Once they're in, what does that process look like for them?
So depending on what system they're trying to get through, um, depending on their age as well. So most of YI services in New York State, we are funded, it's through OPWDD. We also have grants and contracts through the city, through DOH-MH. But most of our services are through OPWDD. It stands for, it's the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. It oversees the services for people with developmental disabilities. So the eligibility process is really first securing an evaluation. The recommendation is that you have some kind of paperwork documenting a diagnosis of IDD prior to the age of 22. So they call it the pre-22 docs. Any kind of documentation, school documentation from school or a doctor, noting that there were suspicion of a developmental disability prior to the age of 22. And then getting medical evaluations alongside with an autism evaluation if that's recommended, and then applying through OPWDD. So right now, the agencies that's handling the application process to apply, they are called CCOs, or care coordination organizations. They have, all of them, they have an intake unit helping families gather proper documentations and then submitting those applications online. And then OPWDD reviews those documentations. Sometimes they will come back and say, I need more documentations, and I need more clarifications on this and that. But most of the time, it's a pretty smooth process. And once they are approved for OPWDD, they can receive a variety of services from family support. So that's recreational enrichment, socialization opportunities, to waiver services. So some employment services, employment support services, day programs, even to different kinds of housing services that's available. People can now choose to self-direct their service. So self-direction is a module where the person with disability and their family member, their primary advocate, can be at the center of the circle of support, and then all of the people that support them, whether it's via a family support or a day program or employment services, can be directly hired by them. So that's a pretty high level overview of eligibility and then services available to them. I forgot to highlight that in addition to that, YI also offers clinical services. So we have an affiliate agency, Premier Healthcare, where they provide medical and subspecialty services. And we also have a clinic, an Article 16 clinic through YI, where we provide people with evaluations and also with rehab services on site. So speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy.
Thank you so much, Charmaine. I see Catherine is taking care of all the great questions in the chat, and I know we have some in the Q&A. We're going to get to them in a minute. So I'm glad you mentioned OPWDD. My niece was the first person who actually told me about that, about all the great resources that it allows you to take advantage of. So if you've never heard about that, after this call, don't go there now, but after this call, make sure you go research it. There's also, I believe, the ABLE accounts where it allows you to have a saving account for your child if they're on the spectrum. So a lot of great resources. So thank you so much for sharing that, Charmaine. So coming back to you now, Jessica, I have to ask this question because when we first got our son into a program that was good for his diagnosis, I mean, we had to take him out of the public school program, nothing against him, but he needed specific services. The first time we got him into a program, it was pretty much across town from where we lived, right? So I have to ask, do you see the difference in how services are provided in rural areas versus urban communities? Because I know I do.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's definitely underserved communities do struggle to get these services. You know, I do provide them within the home, um, but there is a shortage of therapists that do go to the underserved community, which is something that we obviously would never see in someone in a community that has plenty of resources. Um, you know, but fortunately there are a few that do go, and there are other programs within the school that do help these children. But I think that being that we can't change that shortage of therapists and so forth, what we need to focus on is maybe creating opportunities like webinars or workshops, or um, something accessible within the community so that they can have access and an education to know that, you know, maybe something that you can advocate for within for your child within the school, or maybe an agency that can provide home services within your community. It is unfortunately an issue, but I think that we're trying our best, you know. But I think we should have more available resources like remote to educate and for places like Mount Sinai, or knowing that YAI also provides all these wonderful services as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So Chalme, I have an interesting question for you before we get into the Q&A. If you had one goal for the Link program in the next 5 to 10 years, what would it be? You're on mute.
Sorry. So my primary goal really is to secure more sustainable funding for our services through Link. Currently, Link is offered as a service offered to the community for free. And we are a leading resource to the community, and we have very limited funding from OPWDD to provide this specific service to the Bronx community only, while we are supporting all of the other boroughs and regions in the tri-state area. So I would say, you know, my primary goal is to apply for more grants and secure more funding opportunity for Link so we can continue to do the work that we do.
Excellent. Funding
Mhm.
for special services. That's a hot button word when we talk about funding. But I agree with you. I think that's so important. So I mean, the last question I'll have before we get into Q&A, I really think, and you know, either one of you could take this on. Where do you see the services that are being provided for people who are just a part of the neurodivergent community going? I think, Jessica, you made a really good reference, right? We're getting into the virtual age, but is virtual the best for a child who is neurodivergent, or are we now starting to take advantage of technology in order to, I guess, amplify the resources to meet people where they're at, as Chow May said?
Right. I think it depends, I think, on the individual. You know, if I'm thinking of my clients, I can say, oh, this one would be a candidate for virtual, but another needs hands-on experience, needs one-to-one, someone directly present with them to provide those services. You know, I think we should definitely use technology. I think that's the best thing that came out of that pandemic is these remote services that you can speak to an educator, you can speak to a medical professional, and have that access to the information that can lead you to the correct path to maybe to getting the services that are required for your child. I think that would be the ideal path that we would go to help this population.
I agree with you, Jessica. I think COVID, one of the silver lining is to provide more options for people and how they receive their services. So I happen to oversee a program. It's called Transition to Independence. So we provide yoga, mindfulness, kitchen skills, and life skills. And I've had people, we provide those programs on hybrid basis. So people can choose to participate via Zoom, or they can come in person if they preferred. So I think it's more options for people to kind of choose how would they like to receive their services. So I think that's good.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm gonna ask Catherine to come back to the stage because a lot of these questions are up your alley. Gonna give Catherine some time to come back up to the stage. There she goes. All right, perfect. So, first question. What can a parent do to help their newborn child during the first few months to develop milder symptoms of autism?
So I was actually just looking at that question. I think that that's a tough one because we really can't reliably diagnose autism until like really 18 months is kind of the youngest. If you try to make a diagnosis earlier than that, there's just not consistency whether it's actually going to remain an accurate diagnosis. But if you want to learn more about what autism intervention looks like, you can check out a book on the Early Start Denver model. Or you can also look at a book, the DIR, Developmental Individual Relationship-Based Floor Time Model. Both of those are about like having back and forth interactions with a child who has an autism diagnosis. So, as far as with your newborn, I think you would just take care of them just like you would every other newborn. Respond to their needs, provide them safety and support, play with them, cuddle. Try to provide a consistent, safe environment with, nap time and bedtime being at the same times of day. And just, can monitor their development, talk to your pediatrician. And if you do develop concerns about your child's development, then, make that call to EI to get an evaluation started.
Thank you. Next question. I am currently struggling in obtaining an evaluation for my adult son. I have always suspected that he was on the spectrum. All we get is bounced around. Where can we obtain guidance on where to start?
Maybe Chow Mei could answer that one.
You can contact, I'll post my contact information in the chat, but you can contact me and I can help you get started. Not only are we providing the service through our clinic, but we also have free evaluation grants for different boroughs for people who do not have insurance or are underinsured. And I can work with you to get started that way.
Excellent. Thank you, Chow Mei.
No problem.
I have a good question here, and I think, Jessica, you can help out with this one.
Mhm.
So many people assume autistic individuals of any age are less intelligent than average, when they are just as likely to be of average or above average intelligence as anyone else. How do we, as a society, encourage more open-mindedness and acceptance?
I mean, that's pretty tough, unfortunately there is that stigma, but I think it's just demonstrating how you interact with your child, and you as a parent advocating if your child is dealing with autism, to say, hey, this is what my son can do. Guess what? He did this yesterday, and his friend in school can do this, and so forth. Is just actually more speaking out and sharing your experience as a parent, and the joys of the things that they have gained or have learned in, like cooking, or he dressed himself, or he brushed his teeth this morning. This is so fantastic. Or he said we had a conversation about the day at the park yesterday. And that can obviously develop more in that dialogue with the individual, but definitely even advocate for your own child and say their accomplishments. And, I think that would be the first step, ideally.
Thank you. And sticking with you, Jessica,
Mhm.
how long do you follow your students? And do you have an experience to share with a student that is now beyond school age?
So I often stay for quite some time. I have presently some children that I've been working on with for 2 years. But it could be endless. I can work until they're adults at the age of 25. So depending on the medical coverage that you have, it's up to the age of 25 that you can receive services such as speech therapy. I'm not sure about occupational and physical therapy, but definitely speech.
A lot of what we've heard has to do with children on the autism spectrum. What about the adults?
I would say we probably don't talk about adults as much because so much of the evaluation and treatment has really been targeted for children. And much of the treatment happens in the school setting. So many times when children have reached school age, they'll get their counseling in the school setting, they'll get their speech in the school setting, their occupational therapy. And I think that's why we talk so much about kids, because there's so much available to them at that young age. And once they reach adulthood, suddenly there is kind of a drop off of services, which is unfortunate, which is what, you know, services like YAI are looking to supplement. And additionally, historically, when the autism was diagnosed, it would only be individuals who had more significant difficulties. And now we see many more children receiving an autism diagnosis who actually don't have as severe difficulties, but still do have difficulties related to autism. So part of that is that many adults would have already had evaluation and services starting in childhood. So we don't talk about adults as much because many of those individuals had already been addressed as children. But now that we understand autism better, there are more adults that are receiving a first-time diagnosis. And that is where there is more research and focus happening now. But historically, you know, when autism was first understood and the diagnosis kind of first became something that providers would understand and talk about, it was really only individuals who had very severe symptoms, which by adulthood would be very, very apparent. They're recognized early in childhood. I don't know if that answers that question, though.
No, I think you answered it to the best of your ability, and I think it was a great answer. Chow Mei, you probably want to weigh in about what YAI is doing as regards to adults and even employment.
Yeah, so we offer a variety of services to adults with autism. We have different housing options, employment support programs, depending on what they're looking to get, whether it's a volunteer internship or a paid job. And we also offer day programs in different modules for people to gain just different skills that they're looking for. And we also have the program that I mentioned before, the Transition to Independence program. So that program is for people who are aging out of the DOE system and hoping to be more independent, and they may be in the process of applying to OPWDD and were not yet eligible to OPWDD. So we offer a variety of services to people at different stages.
All right. I'm just gonna move through this. Oh, this is a good one. Have there been any known environmental causes to autism?
So that's a great question for one of our geneticists. I think they can answer better than I can. But some studies have shown that women who are pregnant, who experience very severe stress, there is a higher likelihood of the child having a diagnosis, not just autism, but also a diagnosis such as schizophrenia, autism spectrum disorder. If mom experiences very severe stress while she is pregnant. But as far as the environment outside of the womb, nothing is proven right now. There's definitely studies looking into that.
All right, thank you. So, all right, so with the last 5 minutes, I mean, there's been a lot of really good questions, and Jasmine and I will work behind the scenes to probably get a transcript, and maybe we get a part 2 of this. I don't know. It seems like we have a lot of really good questions, and we can keep the conversation going. I just want to give time for Jessica, Chow Mei, and Catherine to just tell people, you know, how they can get in touch with them if they have more questions, if possible. Jessica, I'll start with you.
Yes, you can definitely reach out to me through LinkedIn. Maybe I'll just provide my email in the chat, and I can definitely reach out to you guys for more information or any resources that I can help you with.
Chow Mei?
I've also posted my email in the chat, and I posted a PowerPoint slide of how to get connected with YI using different methods.
And Catherine?
And you have my slides that you'll distribute afterward. I know I really raced through them very quickly, so I would be very happy if anybody contacted me or anybody else here at the Seaver Center.
Absolutely. And I know, Chow Mei, you have an event coming up for YAI.
So we have two major events coming up. We have the Autism Conference coming up this Thursday, and every year we have a different theme, different topic, but this year's will be educational advocacy. So we've had an increased amount of people contacting us because of school refusal, seclusion, and inappropriate restraints. So this year's topic is surrounding that. I've posted the registration link in the chat, and I'll try to do it again so that people can find it. But another one of our event that's coming up, a major event for us on June 1st, on that Saturday, is our Central Parks Challenge. I'll also try to post that in the chat. But it is a day for us to celebrate people of all abilities and for anyone to join us. So I'll also post that information in the chat.
Excellent. I know, Catherine, we're all promoting the Seaver Center's event in our Zoom. If you want to pin any of our Zooms, you can register. But Catherine, please tell them about April 18th.
So that's our autism conference. It's, I think pre-COVID, it was actually a yearly experience. And then as many other things was interrupted. But so it's a day-long conference about many different facets of autism and what we're doing here at the Seaver Center, both in the clinical side as well as the biological and genetic side. So you can certainly learn about it by going through the QR code. It's here in New York City. We would love for people to join if they can.
Thank you so much. Listen, I am so sorry to everyone. I know everybody had a ton of questions. We will download the transcript and work with all of our guests to see if we can have this again, or maybe they can answer your questions individually as they've shared all of their contact information. We only got an hour here. I know I have more questions for them too, but we all got to get back to what we do here at Mount Sinai. But I want to thank all of the guests here, your knowledge, your expertise. You are the reason that we are seeing such an advancement in this field. And we're always glad to have these conversations here and create that acceptance around autism. It's not just about awareness, it's about acceptance. And to one of the questions earlier, it's not how we get people who are on the neurodivergent community to adjust to society. We have to get society to adjust to them. And that's the most important part. And the last little tidbit I'll leave everybody with is, I know this is tough, having raised a child who is diagnosed with autism. The best thing that I can tell you with is, you have to be in it for the long haul. And I heard this from a good friend of mine who's a pediatric cognitive therapist. If it's a struggle now, think about when that child is 5 to 10 years, then 10 to 17 years old. You have to get in the fight. You have to get in the know-how. You have to get all the services, make yourself educated now so that you'll be able to deal with it as you go along, because it's not about dealing with it. These are our family. These are our kids, and the better equipped we are, the better off they will be. And as Catherine stated, it is proven as a scientific fact that if you get early intervention, you will have a good turnout and you'll be about the journey. So I want to thank everybody for attending today, and I hope you all have a very, very good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.